just a second. And with that, I want to take just a second to welcome everyone. I'm Melissa Jones with the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. And we really are excited today to present our final base camp of the semester. So this is an exciting one for you all to join us on. We have our own Daniel Jordan presenting on gamification strategies and ways to add a little bit of fun to your courses. If you have any questions while he is presenting, please know that I'll be monitoring the chat as well. So feel free to post anything there. We'll make sure any questions or ideas you have get answered. And just as one last reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available publicly through our website. So you will be able to watch this at a later time. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Daniel.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Glad you're here for the final base camp of the spring. I'm going to share my screen. To Melissa's point about the chat being open, I am about the last person who's going to be offended if anyone unmutes and just wants to have a conversation during one of these. So if you're comfortable with unmuting your microphone and you just want to speak, please feel free. But other than that, we're going to get going. All right. Everybody see my presentation? A simple thumbs up from anyone will do. Okay, see Melissa nodding, so that's good news. All right, thanks. So I'm going to discuss how to gamify your courses. As Melissa mentioned, I'm Daniel Jordan. I work in the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, and thank you again for joining us. So I want to start by playing a game. This game is called This or That. So you're going to choose one of these options. Would you rather play a game where you always win but never learn anything, or play a game where you always learn, but you may not win? So feel free to either answer in the chat or unmute and share your response verbally. I'd prefer it if everyone played along. So Georgina says she would prefer to play where I learn, play where I learn. The second one, learn. This was way too easy. Everyone won and they learned something. So anybody else want to contribute? Is there anyone who just would prefer to win and not learn? No, nobody likes winning that much. Fair enough. The interesting thing, oh, I love the annotations. Great job. So the interesting thing here is when we think of games, we tend to think, oh, I want to win something. But games in educational settings, winning might not always mean being at the top of a leaderboard. Winning can be walking away with a better grasp on some content, sharpening some skills, whether those are skills specific to the course or soft skills like communication, collaboration, things like that, problem solving. A win doesn't always have to mean beating everybody who's playing the game. A win can be, hey, I came away with improved knowledge or skills. So let's talk about why you would use games to teach. First of all, we learn through play. I mean, if you watch little kids, I've got a 4-year-old daughter. The way she learns best is by playing with her peers, by trying to play with me, with my wife, with her little sister, 4 months old. Play comes natural to us. Through play, we can explore possibilities. We test our limits. We sharpen skills like critical thinking, communication, problem solving, all those things that are important, regardless of the scenario, whether it's educational or professional or even personally. It's the ultimate active learning tool. So when you're thinking about great strategies to implement in a classroom, active learning is where it's at. You want your students to experience some real life scenarios, and you can play those out literally by creating a game situation. An important element of gameplay is discovery. So like I said, kids love to explore. They love to discover new things. Well, young adults and adult learners, the same thing holds true. You want to keep in mind, though, that when you're including elements of discovery in play, it can be a fun add-on. You know, you want students to walk away with some general knowledge. The learning objective should be achieved, but it's helpful to include some little nuggets of information for people who are willing to look. The important thing would be to remember that the way you structure the game, people shouldn't be looking aimlessly. So your rules and the conditions of the game should lend themselves to aiding students who want to dive deeper without sending them on wild goose chases. Second reason why you would want to use games to teach, excuse me, jumping ahead there. Games can enhance learner motivation. There's a ton of research out there on why you would use game or game strategies to in your classroom, and the biggest takeaway is motivation. So great games, if you think about great games, whether it's board games, video games, what have you, they motivate you to want to continue to play. That's why games are so addictive. They also increase engagement. So they draw you in with something like a good story. They want you to continue, or they encourage you to continue advancing through the storyline or advancing through the game so that you can achieve some kind of an objective. And lastly, games can offer mental breaks. So if we've learned nothing from 2020, 2021, living in a pandemic, hopefully we've walked away with the importance of mental health and the value of finding ways to create community and collegiality, even when we might not be sharing the same physical space. So all those things can be achieved through gameplay. Lastly, why would you want to use a game to teach? It's fun. So it can be fun to devise a game, and it's also fun to host a game or to play a game. So it can take away the feeling of, oh, this is another class, it's going to be boring, or it's, you know, something you have to do. Turn it into something that you might want to do. Same for us as instructors. You know, designing a game, while it takes some work and some effort, it can be a fun way of planning out a course. It's not just planning a lecture or designing interaction online. There's some fun elements in this for us as well. So let's talk about how to integrate games. We discovered the why. Let's talk about the mechanics of how to integrate games and what good games should look like. What should they include? The first element should be a narrative. I mentioned that earlier. A narrative should be used to hook your audience. So you want to draw your students in with a storyline that has meaning, that draws interest. It could be a fictional story. It could be real life events. You want to include characters the student will want to help or interact with, and make the storyline compelling. Create a problem that needs to be solved, and write a narrative around that that encourages students to want to solve the problem. Your rules should be clear, concise, and specific. Students should know why they're playing the game. They should know how to play the game. They should know any traps or pitfalls, how they earn points, or their badges, certificates, what are their different levels. All the details should be laid out ahead of time so students know what they're getting into and what they need to do in order to achieve the learning objectives. Learning objectives should absolutely be kept in mind when you're writing the rules to your game. The whole purpose of using a game is to achieve a learning objective. So naturally, your rules should lend themselves to achieving those objectives. Players should have control. So another piece about active learning is that autonomy piece. And the instructor should serve as a facilitator or a guide in gameplay and in good instruction. You don't want to be the sage on the stage all the time. So this is releasing control to the students and allowing them to create their own, come up with their own solutions, test hypotheses, and just really explore and discover, like we said at the beginning. Avoid situations where you as the instructor are either too involved or the gameplay scenario is just overly prescriptive. And lastly, games should be interactive and engaging. Engagement and interaction, those are hallmarks of a great game. They're also hallmarks of great instruction. The best instructors know how to encourage engagement for the purposes of learning. You know how to make learning happen. Game strategies really pair nicely with those goals because they're the same goals in gameplay. They need to be augmented to meet learning objectives, but we can borrow from those strategies to meet our goals as educators. Great games require movement, whether it's mental movement or physical movement. You know, you think of chess, you don't think of physical movement other than moving pieces, but you have to strategize and come up with what are the next moves, or thinking ahead, what are the next 3 moves, 5 moves, X number of moves ahead that you want to try to create opportunities for. Same thing in the classroom. You may not have the ability, right now we don't have the ability to have physical movement, but we do have the ability to encourage mental movement. And when we do return to face-to-face situations, encouraging that physical movement is a great way to increase engagement and to make things interactive. You just definitely want to avoid situations where the student's going to be a passive observer in the game. Some more information on how to integrate games. Feedback. Feedback is absolutely critical. It should be ongoing. It should be meaningful. Those, again, are hallmarks and staples of great instruction, and it's also important to great gameplay. Students should know, hey, if I try this and I'm successful, well, what's next? If I'm unsuccessful, well, what do I do to amend that, or what are my options from there? One of the most valuable elements of integrating a game in the classroom is that opportunity to provide feedback. And if you build a game that doesn't require you to be directly involved with every student all the time, you can be providing feedback in the format of the game without actually having to have that one-on-one touch every single time. So it's a great way to provide personalized feedback without having to be personally involved constantly. That feedback can come in many forms, and it serves to help to keep the student on track to win and on track to achieve learning objectives. Use badges and checkpoints. Those can be motivational. There are two elements you might consider using. Small wins along the way can actually increase engagement and motivation to continue playing. So you want to avoid situations in your game scenario where students are involved in lengthy hunts for information or objectives that are too difficult. Just like in good instruction, you want to chunk the information for it to be effective for some students. Same thing applies in gameplay. And using badges or checkpoints, again, it's a way of giving feedback, but also encouraging students to continue on towards the main goal. Adding time constraints can also force students to make decisions. That sense of urgency can be valuable. Even if students fail on their first or second try, the time constraint can encourage them to go back and try again. They want to make decisions, and you want them to test its effectiveness, but also providing opportunities for them to return to the beginning if need be, and go through the process again so they can achieve the goal of the game and also the goal of the learning. And then, of course, the use of rewards and levels can be used for more challenging material. You think of scaffolding and differentiating your instruction. Levels and rewards are a great way to do that in a game situation. Even if, obviously in a game, there can only be one winner, quote unquote, but we talked about this at the beginning. Winning in a game in an educational setting doesn't necessarily mean being at the top of a leaderboard. So you may have everyone start at the same place, and you want them to reach a certain checkpoint or a certain learning objective, but including levels that allow students who achieve those things quickly with the opportunity to strengthen their understanding or get a deeper understanding of knowledge or practice skills, extra things like that. It encourages them to continue playing as well and continue learning through the process. Loss aversion is another great strategy to use in your games. There's actually research that shows that humans prefer avoiding losses to acquiring games. Loss can be twice as powerful as gain. So if you're awarding points along the way, and there are situations where perhaps a wrong answer can cause a loss of points, it actually encourages students to find the right answer because they don't want to lose the points that they've already earned. So if that's a strategy to consider in your gameplay. And it can be really powerful because, again, it causes students to focus, to engage, and leverage the competitive nature of a game. Competition increases motivation, it increases engagement. Think of using a leaderboard. Make sure you only include the highest scores. I've engaged in debate on this topic a couple of times, and I stand corrected because the research actually says that the best way to do this is to display just the highest scores. So whether it's 3, 5, 10, you think a Kahoot has a leaderboard with the top 3. I think Quizlet does the top 5. So just a small snippet of who the leaders are can be motivational for folks who want to see their name up there without being without disincentivizing the folks who may be struggling. Which reminds me, I'm glad I made a note about this. So the leaderboard idea is something that we're actually using at the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. Hopefully you've seen that on our website. We sent out a blog communication about that. We have a leaderboard for the faculty, something we just rolled out this semester. So faculty who attend our events gain points. Ultimately, you'll gain points for things like presenting, for moderating. We've got a whole points matrix that we're going to roll out eventually. But the goal of this is to engage in a little friendly competition, whether it's competition with yourself, with your peers, interdepartmentally, different colleges, but to make the task of professional development and professional learning, we wanted to add a fun twist to that. So this is a strategy that we've decided to go with as well. We really think it's a great way to encourage the faculty to engage. It makes it fun for us. It's not that our work is, tedious by any means, but it adds an element of fun even for the people putting the game on. So it's always an interesting thing to see. It's not just the players who enjoy it, it's the people coming up with the game that can have some fun too. But we hope you'll engage in that more as that information develops. So when should you use a game? Here's 4 suggestions of when you should use a game in a classroom. These are by no means exhaustive. And in fact, after I go through this, I'd love to hear if anyone else has additional ideas about when a game might be useful in a classroom. But there's a lot of information out there on games for introductions or icebreakers. This or that game that we played at the beginning, kind of a great way to introduce a topic, or even if you have a new class, a new group, the icebreaker thing kind of gets tricky because you hear the word icebreaker and it tends to, for most of us, we think, oh, really, another icebreaker, haha, funny, right? There are actually some really good icebreakers that actually don't suck. And there's a blog by this woman, Jennifer Gonzalez, who writes a blog called Cult of Pedagogy. And she gives some suggestions for icebreakers that don't suck. And she's right. The suggestions she has are really great icebreakers to use in a meeting, in a classroom, what have you. You could use a game to introduce a topic. You can use it to review content, have students practice skills. But I'm interested to hear what you all think. Are there any other scenarios where a game might be useful in the classroom? Feel free to unmute or utilize the chat. Either of those are acceptable.
You might be talking about this later, but even just having the students create their own game around a certain topic could absolutely be helpful. I've seen that done. I've not done that personally, but I've seen that done before. And then letting the other students actually participate in their game.
Yeah, I've seen that before too. That's a great way to have students demonstrate what they know about a topic, and then also to challenge their peers. I think that's a great idea.
I use show and tell, and then 2 truths and a fantasy. And I work with graduate students and they love it. I'll tell you what was a big hit was having a debate where you had a judge that comes in and says which side really had the best case for their debate. That was a very well received and they loved it. And then last week I did just the discussion question for the week. I did it in class and we literally did what's your initial reaction to the prompt, and then what would be some responses. And we went back and forth with about, I think there was like 12 students in the course, in the class. All of those are good ways of engaging the students. And when they went to provide feedback, they all loved that piece that we actually had the discussion.
I think you got cut off. That's a great point, and some great ideas for ways to engage students through. Really, I mean, games, you think sometimes games can be really complex. We've got a faculty member, I don't know if anybody attended the presentation by Patrick Sheridan earlier this semester, but man, he does some awesome things with escape rooms. And he spends a lot of time with developing those. It's kind of a labor of love for him. If you watch the recording, you can tell he really gets into it, and it's amazing to see, and it's really effective in his courses. But you can integrate games that are as informal as the two truths and a lie thing, just to break the ice and make things interesting. There's trivia games out there that you can employ, or just, roll out and play a little 10-question trivia game just to take a brain break in the middle of a class, keep everybody engaged, have a little fun, have a little competition. But it's just informal, it's low stakes, and it's a great way to build that community as well as just have some fun. Melissa's going to put a link to the recording from Patrick, his presentation. I feel like his presentation was notability, Padlet, and more. So his original goal was to demonstrate how to use those apps for learning, but the way he integrates those apps into his courses using escape rooms in particular, that was one of the ones that stuck out to me, was really amazing. So he'd be a great resource for anyone who's interested in creating escape rooms. And in fact, we're going to play a little game at the end of this that's escape room-esque. It's really short, but it's kind of modeled after an escape room. So there are ways of making them as lengthy or as concise as you need. Great point. Yeah, Georgina, you all did that using Fritz for your story. That was at Faculty Development Day, correct?
Right. And so we put the story out there, and then throughout the story and helping Fritz become a happy lion versus a sad lion, we embedded all the technology tools along the way. So we were literally like using the tools in the presentation, but they were learning how to use the tools at the same time.
Right. Great way to couple modeling with some active learning. I mean, what more could you ask for? It was a great presentation. If you haven't seen the recording for that, that's also on our website. All right, so here's some suggested, wow, I can talk too, suggested games. Like I mentioned earlier, the icebreakers that don't suck. Melissa put a link to that blog post from Cult of Pedagogy in the chat. These were 3 that she mentions. There are plenty of other ones out there. These are 3 that she incorporates. So blobs and lines is basically asking students to group themselves based on a characteristic or an opinion that they share in common. You could even do that one virtually. So if you created breakout rooms, you can have students self-select what breakout room to go to. You could say, hey, join breakout room number 1 if you, have on red shoes today, or whatever it is, that it's something trivial that they all have in common. But again, it builds community, and it's something you can even achieve online. Her description is for a face-to-face class, but it can be adjusted to be useful online. Concentric circles is tough to do online, but when you are face-to-face, it's just inside circle, outside circle. You've got a list of questions. They pair up with each other, someone on the inside circle versus someone on, not versus, but with someone on the outside circle. They answer the question with each other. Then one of the circles rotates. They've got a new partner, a new question, a new conversation. And it's just a way of having students or meeting participants get to know each other. And of course, the this or that thing that I modeled at the beginning. Literally pose any question. Would you rather this or that? Have people choose, have people discuss. I used a relatively generic question that I knew everyone would choose one answer, but that was strictly because I wanted it to go quickly. If you wanted to introduce a topic or encourage a more in-depth discussion, obviously we'd want to choose questions that would lend themselves to that rather than one that has such an obvious answer. So while I modeled it, it wasn't the best. I know that, but there was a method to the madness. Some other suggestions would be the online quiz games, Kahoot, Quizlet Live, Gimkit. Gimkit is a little gimmicky, but it's effective. There are a lot of interesting ways for them to play the game. So I would explore that before you really roll that out. But Kahoot and Quizlet really lend themselves nicely to the classroom. Does anybody know of any other online games, quiz games, that might be beneficial for the group? No? Well, I mentioned earlier escape rooms or scenarios like that. Again, Patrick, great resource for that. If you have questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those. And then another one, Tyler Sanders uses scavenger hunts in the freshman orientation classes. So he'd be a great resource if you're thinking about including a scavenger hunt. Can someone, Melissa, do you have Patrick's email?
I do. I can put that in there. And then also to address Christine's question about what happens when the live sessions aren't necessarily recorded or not necessarily required. And, I teach fully asynchronous online classes and have implemented some of these strategies too. So although we can look at this from the two angles, we can look at it as how to encourage students to be in our live sessions, but also, Daniel, maybe if you could speak to any sort of asynchronous activities as well. So I know, for example, something like the scavenger hunts, I teach research and writing courses. And so a scavenger hunt that I've created is for them to go through and find things in the library databases. And so that can all be done asynchronously using different video tools, things like Flipgrid and video responses. You can do some gaming elements as well. So there are some options for fully online asynchronous meetings. And so Daniel, I don't know if you maybe want to address some of Christine's questions there, and I'll add in Patrick's email for everybody.
Sure, absolutely. Escape rooms can also be asynchronous. You can send them off individually. So if you have an asynchronous online course, just access the escape room scenario. The one that we're going to do at the end here would be great. Either we're going to play it live, but you could definitely do it asynchronously as well. It's just a PowerPoint with, you click through, it's got hints. I'll explain the game itself, but when you see it, it'll make sense. But yeah, obviously, well, even something like Kahoot. Kahoot offers something called a Kahoot challenge, and that can be played asynchronously as well. So everyone accesses the link to the challenge, and they're competing against each other, but it's not necessarily in real time. So there is a time constraint. I think you can set it up to 24 hours. So you give your students a full day to access the challenge and play it. But then at the end of the day, the leaderboard displays, rather than playing it live in a class, they would be playing it on their own. So that's a great way to use that game asynchronously as well. All right, so speaking of this little escape room, this is, first I want a disclaimer. This is a PowerPoint template that I borrowed from a website called eLearning Heroes. So they're associated with the Articulate products. And so by no means did I go through and create all this. I added my questions to the places where they said add your text. I would definitely recommend when you're starting to implement these things, don't reinvent the wheel. Find things that are out there that people have already created and make it work for you. I mean, as educators, we know, the best things are usually borrowed and then repurposed. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. Don't feel the pressure of, oh, I want to try something, but I've got to create it from scratch. Surely there's someone out there who's tried this before that can give you some guidance or some materials to make the job easier. So in this one, it's a scenario where we will be helping a fictitious character, Dr. Emily Cavendish, find an item in her office. So there'll be a little more information about why we want to do that in a moment. But as we help her search, we're going to answer questions about using games for teaching and learning in order to find hints about where her lost item is. So this is Dr. Emily Cavendish. She's a research scientist at the Hackett Jacobson, and she needs our help. There's been a security breach, and she's on lockdown. The problem is she needs to get her research to her top secret offsite location to keep it safe. She's asking if we could help find the thumb drive she's hidden in her office. She's given us the key to unlock her office door. So we're going to click to take the key. And of course, if you were having your students do this, obviously they would just click to take the key. They could do this live together. They could do it asynchronously. Animations have been built in, so it plays through. So we get some feedback. Nice job. Now that you're in her office, we need to be careful. She's added some booby traps to keep her thumb drive safe. She can't remember where they are, but it's probably safe to start searching in her briefcase. Just select it to see what's inside. So we're going to search around the room, find her briefcase. So she tells us, yes, I remember now. I left a series of clues to the location of my thumb drive in the form of questions. Select the envelope to reveal the first question, answer it correctly to reveal a clue to the location of the next envelope. We'll open her envelope. And here's how we're going to gain one of our hints. So the first question is, which of these is a benefit to using games for teaching and learning? Is it that games force students to learn to play by the rules? The games enhance learner engagement and motivation. The games should not be used because they're too distracting. So feel free to unmute somebody, throw out the answer, or put it in the chat. See 2 votes for the second option. Anybody else have a thought before we move on? Excellent use of the annotation tools. Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and select games enhance learner engagement and motivation. Let's see what happens. Turns out that was the correct answer. So excellent work. The clue she gives us is the key to this mystery lies in a drawer. Just be sure it's not one that's over a door. So we need to remember that as we go back and search her office. All right, so let's take a look around, and don't forget about the clue she just gave you. I really like how we're using the annotation tools. So if you would access those and indicate where we should click next on the screen, or where you think we should click next on the screen. You access the annotation tools. I have them in a different spot than you do, so you may need to click more to select the annotation tools. Karen, is that the top drawer or the bottom drawer you're pointing to? See, Georgina says the top drawer over here in the little end table.
Well, since it's not over a door, you could go with either one. You might need to check both of them.
Let's find out. So Georgina says the top one, so let's click the top one and see what we find. We got lucky. So let's open the envelope. Let's see the next question. I'll go ahead and clear the drawings. All right, so the next question is whether games should include, or games should not include, which of these? Instructions that are vague and confusing, frequent opportunities for meaningful feedback, or levels and rewards.
Mhm. I've never used this annotation tool before. This is pretty cool. But look at my arrows. They're not in the right place.
Oh, that's okay. You can select those and remove them.
Oh, okay.
If you find you're putting them in the wrong place, just put a bunch of them in the right place. That's
So I'm like, how do you do that? I never used this before. Thanks, Karen, for being energetic with these annotation tools.
yeah, and this is a fun way to, again, have your students play the game with you. So if they're playing in groups, they could do it this way. If you're playing as a class, you could do it this way. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it looks like we've got the most action over instructions that are vague and confusing. Even though that's the right answer, I want to select one of the wrong answers just to show you some of the things that have been built into this one. So if you select the option that says games should not include frequent opportunities for meaningful feedback, even though we know that's obviously wrong, you do get some feedback here. It says, sorry, no clue for you. I really hope you'll be able to find my hidden thumb drive. So students get one shot in this scenario to get the correct answer. And if they don't get it, they don't get a clue. They have to go back and search the office again. So the other option would be, if we go back here, you select the correct answer. Again, some more feedback. Way to go. You get the next clue. So the next clue is she has lots to say, but I'm sorry. The next clue is I have lots to say, but never speak. I have a spine, but no bones. What am I? So as we go back, I'm going to clear our drawings. So where should we look next? Keeping that last hint in mind. Use your annotation tools to tell me where to click. The hint was I have a lot to say, but never speak. And I have a spine, but no bones. Candace says books. Any book in particular? Christine thinks the first book. Let's try the first book. Let me turn my annotation tools off so I can. So the first book, there we go. Yeah, we did it. She hit her thumb drive with all her research between the pages of this book. And now you found it. Thanks for being so persistent. So we helped her achieve the goal. Throughout the course of the game, we answered a few questions, again, with obvious answers just to speed things up. But there was feedback, there were opportunities for us to fail and have to try again. So overall, I feel like that was a really good template. Send yourself back to the beginning. But really, that's kind of it for me. Are there any questions or comments on games and using games in your courses that we can answer before we wrap up?
Hey, Daniel, if I were going to use this in an online course and I didn't want to do it synchronously, but I wanted people to do it ahead of time, would I just embed the link to the template, or how would I do that?
Sure. So in D2L, you can have your PowerPoint play out inside the course shell. So that's one option, or you could make it downloadable and have them work through it on their own and then just share their results.
Mm-hmm.
Either way would be effective.
So where do you find the, okay, I Googled the templates for gamifying a course or gamifying course content.
Mhm.
So do you download that as a PowerPoint?
Right, yeah, so this one, like I said, I found on the website called eLearning Heroes. I'll post a link and I'll share what I'm planning on doing is I've got a PDF with all the presentation materials, and I'll put that in an email with links to all of the things that I've referenced. So some of the games, the place to find some of these PowerPoint templates. Melissa included the link to the Cult of Pedagogy blog. All that information will be in the email I send out at the end. But you could absolutely just use Google and Google escape room games for educators, and just add something about PowerPoint, and you'll
Yeah, I
find
was
a number of
surprised.
files.
Yeah, I was surprised at the number of templates and different options you have here. So that's pretty cool. I'm all in. I'm going to try this in my next online course, which starts in a few weeks.
Awesome. Yeah, and ultimately what I'd like to do is build out a page on our website that has some of this information that's downloadable for the faculty. So as we come across templates that we like, or as you all, the faculty, come across things that you like that you use, if you would share those with us, we'd be happy to house those as downloadable objects, I think, on our website. I think I'm kind of committing us to something here without running it through the channels first, but I think it's a good idea. So hopefully I'm not going to get my hand slapped.
No, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, because there are a lot of these great free resources. Some of them are pay resources. Obviously, if you find something on something like Teachers Pay Teachers, we wouldn't post that publicly because someone's trying to make some money on that. But if you find a free one, or you develop a free one that you're willing to share, let us know and we'll be happy to make that available somewhere.
Yeah, we could actually develop a page on our teaching slot that's just gamifying your course,
Right.
And actually the stuff you have here, we can go ahead and put that up and then add any additional resources. I found this one because I remember getting an email from this guy that has a website called Ditch That Textbook. And he sends out emails all the time, but I think it's pretty much all free resources that he uses, like a lot of Google stuff for actually creating your own escape room. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are YouTube videos with tutorials, all that. I mean, as much as you want to dig for, I'm sure you can find information to help get you started.
And I shared one link in the chat. It's the e-learning industry one. And that's for anybody who may be new to gamification or prefers some low-tech versions of ways to gamify with activities you're probably already doing, and just simple modifications that can be made to make it a bit more game-like. So I shared that one in the chat as well.
Thank you. Like I said, I'll make sure that all these links that are in the chat are in the email with the presentation materials for everyone after this. Anybody have any ideas or things that they're already using that you're willing to share that I could include in that email? and safe disclaimer that it probably will end up on our website when we get that built out too, if you give it to us now. We'll probably even give you credit.
I don't see anything else in the chat. Is there anything that I've missed in the chat? Were there any other questions that we could ask Daniel to answer for us? Okay, if there is nothing else, Daniel, thank you so much. I am going to turn the floor over to Karen, and she's going to wrap us up for the day. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording, so know that we will stop recording at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks.